He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with over 27 years of experience. Together, he and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. We're back for another episode, Henry, and I just got to say at the beginning, we are going to miss your presence this particular couple of episodes because, you're traveling and you couldn't join us. But I soldiered on. I'm sure I didn't ask the same questions that you would have asked, but I did my best. So we'll see how this thing pans out. I'm really excited about this particular episode because the woman we're talking to today in a two-parter is someone whose work I've known for, oh my goodness, maybe 2 decades, not quite 2 decades, but I didn't meet her until just days ago. Her name is Sarah Walker Hall. She is the brand strategy group head at TRG, formerly the Richards Group in Dallas. And what makes it so exciting for me personally is that she is the author of a brief on Kiwi shoe polish, this tiny little can, a little widget that we are accustomed to selling, that I have used as a teaching tool in my workshop for a very, very long time, almost as long as the brief she wrote. It's been 20 years since she wrote it, but I've never met her until just a few days ago. So I'm excited to have this chance to have a conversation with her and then to do a deep dive into this brief that I think, well, it's pretty darn close to being a perfect brief. You and I both know that there's no such thing, but this one is really good, and we're going to explain why. So part 1 today is let's get to know Sarah, and part 2 is next time we're going to do a deep dive. So let's meet Sarah Walker Hall right now. Okay, we are back with another episode of the Brief Brothers, and as you can see, it's just me. Henry has been unexpectedly detained and couldn't join us today, which I'm sure he apologizes.
Unavoidably detained.
Nevertheless, we are going to proceed because we have a special guest, someone I have admired for a very long time. And quite frankly, I didn't know she existed because I knew her work, but didn't know her. Her name is Sarah Walker Hall. She is brand strategy group head at the Richards Group in Dallas. And she is actually quite famous, at least in my world, as a brief writing instructor and a devotee of creative briefs, of a brief that I think is probably among the finest, most inspiring briefs I've ever come across. And I use it in my blog posts and I use it in my books. It's for Kiwi shoe polish. A tiny little can of packaged goods, the most insignificant product you could imagine. But her brief produced an award-winning campaign. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wait until farther into our conversation to talk about the brief and the work it produced, because I want you, our viewers, to meet this woman, this amazing woman, a woman I've been a fan of. I've been a fan of her brain. I've been a fan of her work, and now she's with us. So Sarah, welcome to the Brief Brothers. Delighted to have you.
It's great to be here.
All right. So as this planner, now you're head of brand strategy group head, you have been in the business for how long? And why don't you just introduce yourself to our viewers? What got you into advertising? What drew you to strategy and planning? You have a really interesting story about how you found your way to planning and brief writing. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I went to a liberal arts college. I'm from Dallas, which you'll hear in my voice. But I went to a liberal arts college in New England. I majored in history, which when I graduated, my parents got me a pin that says, I have a liberal arts degree. Do you want fries with that? They thought that was really funny. Because I had gone through college thinking I wanted to be a history professor until I discovered that to do that, you have to become the foremost expert in the world on some creaky, unexplored crevice of history that no one else had really ever kind of tackled. And to me,
who cares about?
Yeah, exactly. And to me, what I liked about history is actually analogous to planning. It is that despite all of our technological innovations and the like, humans are humans, and our base instincts and our core being has not changed. And so to me, what was interesting about history was the connective tapestry that it is. So I was like, okay, can't do that. I was tired of cold weather, moved to Los Angeles, and thought that if I just sent out resumes cold, that I would, I can't remember the types of companies I sent them to. Advertising was really not on my radar at all as a history major. No surprise. And I was out, I really like punk rock, and I was at a punk rock club in Hollywood, a lot sketchy. And this guy who looked like John Lithgow, but wasn't, came and tapped me on the shoulder with my friends and said, you know what? I've been trying to cast for a commercial for the past 2 days, and I've seen 500 models and actresses, and I'm none of them. I want you. This is the look, the whatever I was going for. And he had this like a little handheld camera and took me outside of the club. My friends came with me because they're like, this is sketchy as shit. Like, we need to go with you. And screen tested me and just said, talk about yourself. And I found out in like literally a day or two that I'd been cast in a Maxwell House commercial.
Really?
Yeah. So I went to the shoot, and the professional actresses and models and the like said, you've got to be a principal in the commercial, that you'll get residuals and blah, blah, blah. And so I was the good to the last drop girl for like 3 years, because it was CPG. It ran for 3 years. And I got there, and for some reason the planners were on set, and advertising again had never crossed my mind as anything I would do with a history degree. I was like, should I go to law school? I don't know. I took the LSAT. I did well. I was like, maybe I should go to law school. But my dad thankfully was like, you're right brain and creative. You'll hate it. So
Yes.
I'm still to this day thankful to my father for that insight that I did not have about myself. But I was introduced to advertising actually as a principal in a Maxwell House commercial. It actually, I bought my first house with residuals, which was nice. But I was all of a sudden like, well, I'm in LA. There's this advertising thing looks more, I don't want to say academic, but thoughtful and deliberate and strategic than I would have ever thought based on what I saw on the television. And so I sent a resume to Day in Los Angeles and got hired as an account group assistant in account management. And
That's aiming high. That was one of the best shops in LA.
Well, and I didn't know at the
It's
time.
not the best.
Like, they had just moved out of the Frank Gehry binocular building into the wide array building. And I worked on Taco Bell at the Yokiro Taco Bell. And so one of the main tenets of my job, not tenets, one of the main functions of my job, it was kind of a tenet, was when Gidget the Chihuahua came into the office, I was to follow it around and clean up its detritus that it left in its path, whatever that might be. I had a walkie-talkie on my belt.
You can say shit on our show.
Okay. I will, trust me. So I kind of, it's very unorthodox entry into advertising and in account management. Like,
I'll say
in retrospect, it's risible that I could even do it, but I just was like, I'm not going to fail at this. So I was there for a little while, but I was so low on the totem pole that I was obviously never exposed to planning. Like, I followed the dog, and I did reservations. That was the ilk of my job. Moved back to Dallas, had a very brief stint in PR because it seemed strategic, and I was really good at writing press releases, but I would also have to cold call reporters, like 500. I would sit in a conference room with a stack, and it was about technology middleware that I knew nothing about nor cared. So I jumped out of that into a small agency here called Tractor Beam, which was only like 13 people, but it was mostly brand identity, graphic design. And I had an account manager. We didn't even really have titles, but I soon discovered that my value to the agency was my ability to develop strategy and write, to convince clients this is the right direction to go and the like. And then a job opened up at the Richards Group 3 or 4 years subsequent. And I went in as a digital account supervisor which is still crazy. And I was there for 6 months, perhaps, and then got invited to a meeting. This was when Starbucks was going into grocery stores. Prior to that, they had just been this, Starbucks. You had to go to the store. But then they, of course, were going to unleash this line of products into grocery stores so you could have Starbucks there. And I was in a meeting with 30 other people. It was a huge brainstorm. And a guy named Christopher Owens gave a presentation about Starbucks and what Starbucks meant, and the kind of the accessory of the cup. This was again when Starbucks was still, it's a different brand, I'll just say, than it is.
Is this late? Is this early 2000s, late 1990s?
Early 2000s. Yes, I graduated from college in 98, so I won't ask you to do the math,
Okay.
but
Okay.
Anyway, I saw Christopher give this presentation, and he will, as I told you, perennially be the planner I want to be when I grow up. He is the most incredible planner I've ever met. And I saw him give this presentation about Starbucks and the semiotics and the symbolism and what it meant to, like, all of this. And I had this epiphanous moment that I'd never had in life before, where like angels were singing on high. And I was like, this is what I think about for fun. Like, when I'm not at work, this is what I think about, or stuff like that, like the semiotic symbol. I'm big into symbolism and what it means, and the club you join when you are carrying the same cup as somebody else. And so I went to Stan Richards, who was it was his eponymous agency at the time. And I said, I want to switch into planning. And he said, Sarah, you're doing a great job. We all love you. You've got a bright future in account management. And I was like, this is not what I want to do. That's what Christopher does. That's what I want to do. And so Stan was, I am still very appreciative that he allowed me to move over. And I actually interviewed, just as anyone else would, for a junior planner position, and ended up working for Christopher. And we had, 10 planning directors at the time. So that was just serendipitous. Like, he needed a planner and I was available, and I already idolized him. And so was kind of thrown into planning as a history major from a liberal arts school, having never taken a marketing, advertising, and business class, not even statistics. That was not offered at my liberal arts college. And Christopher was, I didn't know at the time, the ideal boss for me to have, because he basically saw that I had potential, thought that I had potential, and just basically was like, figure out planning the way you want to do it. Again, no training. So, I truly had tabula rasa to just be like, here are these business problems. Here's a brand problem here. How do you solve these? And so I was allowed to do it the way that made sense to me. And
Do you know how many other people we've had on our show who have a very similar story of,
Really?
I didn't know advertising from Jack. It was never on my radar. Henry started off in retail. I worked in media relations.
Yeah.
I didn't get my first copywriting job till I was 30. We had a lot of life to live before I ever thought about advertising. So that part of your story is not unique, but you were thrown into this deep end with a boss who saw something in you. And what accounts did you work on when you were first under Christopher?
Well, I worked on Hyundai right out of the chute. And luckily we had a data analyst there who was kind enough to sit down with me and teach me the basics of statistics, because again, I did not know, and I had always avoided math.
As a fellow right-brainer, I get that.
Yeah, when I say avoided, that's me putting it mildly. I went to great lengths to avoid anything math related. But so I worked on Hyundai for a while. I love cars. It's the biggest branded purchase you'll ever make. And to this day, at the advanced-ish age I still take great pride in meeting somebody and trying to figure out what car they drive. Hmm.
All right, what kind of car do I drive?
Oh. Oh, I don't, yeah, I don't know. I want to put you in the
You
soup.
don't
Yeah, but that's not right.
Kona. I have a Kona. A
Gotcha.
Hyundai Kona.
Whenever I have a client who thinks is a little bit skeptical or incredulous that branding really does add monetary value, I always pull the JDS, and the JD Power, sorry, JDS,
Hmm.
initial quality tests and ranks.
Hmm.
And Hyundai and Kia are always at the top, and Range Rover, Land Rover, and Jaguar are at the bottom. I have a slide that I've used, I can't tell you how many times. It's like, if you're going to tell me that brand doesn't matter, look at this list, because
Well, it often is the only thing that matters.
it is, but I don't know why we were doing focus. Again, this is so long ago, but we were doing focus groups with BMW drivers. I don't why, I'm not sure. And I sat there and listened to BMW drivers talk about German engineering and all of this. And I was like, I live in Dallas. This is like LA, a very car-centric town.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you how many times I've been in restaurants or whatever and seen this kind of ostentatious display of BMW key fobs. One of my favorite books is Predictably Unpredictable. Because as humans, we like to think that we're logical creatures. We love to think that. We are not at all. If we were, everyone would drive a Hyundai or a Kia. And of course, that to me
Or
was
Toyota.
yeah. Or I mean, like seriously, like, so to me as a planner, that's fascinating that we like to think that we're logical.
I'm gonna guess that you've read Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes.
Yes, that's the whole argument. Yeah.
It is, but I have friends that work in advertising. I have a lot of friends who don't work in advertising, or hairstylists and any number of other things. And they're like, advertising doesn't work on me.
Of course not.
No.
Of course not. You're immune.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so like in one particular conversation I had, this person was making fun of Skittles advertising, which this was kind of at the height of when it was very surreal and, whatever. I was like, is there anything Skittles could have done to make you go buy a pack of Skittles? Is there anything they could have said, shown, done, whatever? And she's like, no. And I was like, okay, you're not the target audience. And advertising is not about getting you to see an ad and grab your car keys at that moment and go purchase a product.
Unless it's direct response. But that has an effect on a very, very tiny percentage of people. But yeah, you're right. I mean, well, there's no saying in our business. The best way to kill a bad product is with good advertising.
I have used, yes. I have used that a number of times. So I was at the Richards Group. I was, again, 28 years old and had shown promise, I guess. I question that, in account management, and was thrown in on Hyundai. But then this was, early aughts. And much to my incredulity, even at the time, planning was dominated by males, even though women make or heavily influence 83% of the purchases in this country. And the Richards Group
purchases of everything.
Everything.
Yes.
I mean,
even there's no category that they don't have an influence. So let's be clear about that.
Women make almost 6 out of 10 purchase decisions on tires. I mean, financial services, all these things, you'd be like, oh, men do that. No, it's women. And we had a paucity, if you will, of women at the agency at that time. And so I kind of got this serendipitous chance to go pitch the Dallas Morning News. which Stan Richards very much wanted it, I guess, in his mind, and it's perhaps true that there was cachet in having your local newspaper, especially if in a bigger city like Dallas. And I stood up and kind of it was more of a capabilities presentation, like here's planning. It didn't involve me having thought through any insights or anything, but I had kind of an out of body experience because I'm actually shy. Take me to a party, I won't say anything unless you approach me. I stood up there and just loved it. I loved talking about planning, even though I still like didn't know really what it was. We're just kind of talking. And everyone thought I did a great job, believe it or not. And so it's funny because I absolutely self-identify as a capital F feminist. But I will say that back in those days, my gender helped me because advertising, especially the agency I was at in the city I'm in, was dominated by men. And occasionally we would have a client who had a woman in a position of power. And I'll never forget, like the Dallas Morning News, the CMO was a woman, and she said almost 80% of our readership is women. And so she really focused in on me. And so the Richards Group, obviously, and especially of late, has done indefensible things. If you want to talk about that later, we can, but I'm going to avoid that for now. But because I did a good job in this pitch, because I had presence, because I'm super passionate and it's genuine and people can tell.
Well, you know the old saying there too, right? People don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever used it. I've heard that. But when I look back on kind of what has gotten me where I am in my career, genuine passion for a brand, or, and usually in my case, it's humans, it's customers.
Right.
It goes a really long way, and people can tell when it's real and when it's an act. And
so you were brought on as a planner working with Christopher Owen, and you did a deep dive into Hyundai and essentially learned statistics.
yes,
And you got involved in this pitch for the Dallas Morning News. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you got the account.
we did not.
You did not. Okay. But your presence, your impact on both the client and probably your colleagues had a huge impact on your
Very much
career.
So.
What I'm building up here to the essence of our conversation was, so what makes me so delighted to have you here, which was the account on which you wrote your very first brief. When did that happen next, or am I skipping ahead?
It literally was like a couple weeks later. That maybe.
Okay, so tell us about that. You did not get the Dallas Morning News account, but you had an impact on probably Christopher and the people at TRG.
Yes. And so,
you got assigned to this next account, which was
Kiwi shoe polish.
Kiwi shoe polish.
Which is interesting because if gender got me onto Dallas Morning News and could have ostensibly obviated me from being a player on Kiwi, which obviously skews male, although women use it. But the principal who was in charge of that account had been in the Dallas Morning News pitch and was like, I want Sarah. I think she deserves a shot to, do this. And it was a relatively large account monetarily at the time, but also is a cool brand. Like, it's just again, history major. So I love brands with lineage, and I love brands that speak to a different time. And I got, if I tell you the true story about Kiwi, I got so into, I have a theory about planning and how it works for me, is I call it the Big Bang. I push my thinking out as far as I can possibly push it. And then it's my job to bring it in as tight and pithy as possible. So I got into this whole rabbit hole of, we live in a disposable culture now. We don't keep things the way we used to. I did so many interviews with men on Kiwi where they would talk about the smell, and it inevitably evoked their father or grandfather. Sunday nights, the little key that it opens. I mean, there were so many tactile, super emotional connections men had with Kiwi, which to me, I was fascinated by. And so I was kind of going that route. And then I went to North Park Mall in Dallas, just to take pictures of men's shoes. So I just walked around the mall if you're not from Dallas, North Park is a high-end mall, but I just walked around on like a Tuesday morning and asked these men, can I take a picture of your shoes? I just wanted to use them for my presentation, to be honest. And I noticed that almost to a man, they got very sheepish when I asked. They blushed. They were like, I wish I had a different pair of shoes on. I've been outside. You should probably be in better shape than they are. Like, there was all of this, like, I'm a little scared of you taking a picture of my shoes because I don't think they represent me. And I know I should be taking better care of them, and I'm not. So as soon as that camera, and this is old school, so I had like a camera, not a phone. As soon as I was like pointed that camera at their shoes, they started to fess up in a way that I hadn't heard in the official qualitative I had done, where I talked about the brand. Instead, just going at it like, can I take a picture of your shoes, cracked open this universe to me where I'm like, men kind of think they're getting away with something. They don't think that anyone else is really looking, and they can kind of get by with, whatever. They know deep inside that they should be taking better care of their nice shoes, but they weren't. And that led, I think in terms of epiphany, like all of a sudden I'll be like, got it. And so this idea of, I'm looking at your shoes and I'm extrapolating some things from that, like what I think of you. And that's where ultimately the brief came from. I was down this rabbit hole about disposable culture and what do we do? I was thinking about the category, not the brand, obviously, because Kiwi is the category for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. One of the questions I asked when I teach this brief, I said, can anyone name a competitive brand? And they all go blank. It's like, yeah, but it's on I can't. No, I can't.
Yeah. And
they own the category. You're right.
And to this day, I love when somebody is the category, because I think that allows you to expand your thinking.
Right.
You don't need to get into different product differentiators and the like. And so I scrambled back to the office and completely rewrote the brief. I hadn't shown it.
So you had a brief draft before you went out.
I had a brief, but okay. I had not shared it because it wasn't ready to share with Christopher or the creatives. And I completely just tossed it and was like, I think this insight I very inadvertently stumbled upon by pointing a camera at men's shoes and then listening to them and watching their cheeks redden and come up with all of these kind of, it's a trope.
Hey, let me stop you. Let me stop you there, because before I hit the record button, you and I were chatting about what goes into being a good brief writer. And I told you that our first episode, Henry and I talked about this. We asked the question, what makes a good brief writer? And Henry, who's the strategist, said, good writing. A brief writer must have writing skills. And I said, as the writer, as the copywriter, the guy who receives the brief, said, yeah, that's true. If you hadn't said that, I would have said that. But I think the true gift, the true quality of a good brief writer is the ability to listen, and not just with your ears, but with your eyes, which is precisely what you're doing here, which is so cool. This is so cool.
I love it. That's what I mean. I am lucky to say I am 47 years old. I've been doing my job for more than 20 years, and I still love it. Not every day. Maybe not every day's great, whatever. But it's the fact that I get paid to be observant, to eavesdrop. I don't like to think about it that way. I just like to listen to people's conversations, to see what they're wearing, to see how they're moving about the world, to pay attention. Like at the grocery store, at the mall, at the school where I pick my son up, like all of these things are opportunities, in my opinion.
So you had a draft that you tossed. How much time did you put into that original draft?
A lot. I'm
lucky. I asked this question because it's important.
Yes.
You have no idea how many times I do a training and people will say, oh yeah, I get an hour to write a brief. I get 20 minutes to write a brief. I get a day to write a brief. So how much time did you put into the draft that you ultimately threw away?
Probably 6 the actual writing of the brief, not the research that went into it, probably 6 to 8 hours, because to me,
Okay. Over a couple of days or in one
Yeah,
sitting?
over 2 or 3, and it wasn't ready.
Yeah.
Remember, I had not shared it
Mhm.
yet because in my
Right.
opinion, it was not ready because every word had not been deliberately thought through. But yes, I tossed it. I'm not precious about ideas. If I have an idea that I am growing fond of, but I come across something different, I'm good to toss it and start anew. So that's exactly what I did. And so I wrote this different brief that was all based on these couple of hours I'd spent at the mall with a camera, approaching guys and saying, can I take a picture of your shoes? But I do believe, first of all, I love to write. I mean, again, I'm a liberal arts, whatever. I mean, I believe in the power of words, which is something I struggle with now with, my younger friends, and I get texts that are just emojis. And I'm like, yeah, I don't do emojis. I do words. But I do think it is incredibly important, but you also have to be willing, I think, as a planner, if you have an idea you like, but you come across something different or your brain goes in a different way, or somebody says something that's like, oh, wow. And sorry for the cliche, the hackneyed, but like the dominoes start to fall. You have to be willing to toss that, I believe, and not be too precious about your ideas and keep your mind open as long as you can.
So you tossed your original draft and you started over.
Yes.
Was this like a brain dump because of this insight, or how much time did you spend on this new version?
Probably 10 to 12 hours.
Okay.
Which
that doesn't surprise me either.
I've never been admonished for how much time I spend on work, because as I've been told, it shows. I know that's something that we all deal with in advertising, is how much time are you spending on this?
Well,
but
the opposite of that, or an ancillary of that, I'm not sure what the right word is. And I repeat this a lot in my training because I have this thing about deadlines because I think they're just bullshit. Because there's the other saying that I love to share with my in my workshops is there's never time to do it right.
no.
There's always time to do it over.
Yep.
So I think the important point that I also want to make here is that you took 6 to 8 hours to write the first draft that you threw away. You had this experience out in the mall, which opened your eyes to a fascinating insight, which we will see in this draft of this brief. It's a Kiwi brief that led to an award-winning campaign, is what Christopher Owens told me. The case study and your brief also was entered into a competition and did very, very well. Yes. I forget exactly what it did. I often ask the question, in my training, how much time do you marketers spend writing a brief? And they'll tell me, an hour, 2 hours, which is crazy. Now, then I also say, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, not every project requires a creative brief. If you're going to spend that amount of time, don't do it for every single thing that you do. What do you think?
I completely agree. And it's interesting. I was talking to Christopher very recently about this because we are very similar in a lot of ways, whether that's causal, correlational, I don't know. But whether I learned that from him by osmosis, I don't know. But I think we're just wired similarly, as well as we really, the two of us especially, put more emphasis now on the briefing than the brief. And so, yeah, no, it's actually been remarkably, I think, effective. I had the benefit, my best friend was an absolutely kick-ass creative who'd been at Wyden and Mad Dogs and Englishmen and et cetera, and they, are fantastic. And we got thrown together. They were by far the coolest person in the agency. And I remember the first time I met them, I fell down the stairs because I was wearing heels that I was not equipped to walk in. I thought I was, but I wasn't. And I was like, shit, God, they're so cool. How did I just do that? But they did a lot of new business. And after the Dallas Morning News, and then after the Kiwi pitch, which went really well. And again, I had no idea that I had this person inside me, to be honest, that could stand up. I mean, I have props. I walk the room. I bang the tape. I mean, I don't script anything ever.
Wait a minute, Sarah, here. So you were involved in pitching Kiwi? It wasn't an existing client?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. See, this is what's so cool about this conversation.
Sorry, of course. How would you know that?
I've been teaching this brief as a brilliant example of clarity, of insight, of inspiration in 127 words, because I had the time and counted the words, right? It's a single page thing. It causes, when I show the brief to my workshop participants, it causes angst because they're expecting to see things that aren't there, which we'll get to in a minute. But I didn't, first of all, I didn't know who wrote this brief.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know, and now I know who you are. And I just assumed that Kiwi was a pre-existing client. So tell us, this was a pitch that you won, and was this one of the first projects out of the box for the client that you wrote this brief for, the famous Kiwi brief?
Yeah, they had just been recently acquired by Sara Lee Bath and Body. Sara Lee was kind of expanding its portfolio, and they really had let it lie limpid and latent as a brand. And I think we're probably I can't even remember who the previous owner was. I think they were going to leave it on the vine, so to speak. Sara Lee acquired it and saw potential. So they put it into review. I think there are 4 or 5 agencies, typically. And so, yes, this was a pitch brief, and I did the pitch. I've been a planner for like 2 or 3 months at this point. But what happened, and more to my amazement than anyone else's, trust me, is that I'm so passionate about planning, and I don't script anything. So I just know my stuff backwards and forwards and get up. And back then I used to do everything on flip charts, and I would have somebody illustrate, one of our art directors illustrate my flip charts, and then I would write on them. And it was like a story, like quite literally a storybook.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that. And the principal on the business after the pitch was just like, I've never seen anything like that, like what you just did.
Do you still have those pitch?
No.
That's too bad.
No, I know. I've moved to Keynote, and it's just, it was so time consuming. My personal tag, I think the world is over tagline. Ironically, I have my own tagline, which is, I will expand to fill every minute allotted to me. So your point about a deadline, you cannot force creativity. And in my opinion, the brief is actually the first creative step in the process.
Absolutely. So John Haggerty says this, John Steele says this. This is first step of the creative process. It's not part of strategy. If you don't have a strategy, go home, go to lunch.
It is. And you cannot force, you cannot, just like creatives can't force an idea to come on time, nor can, I think, a planner who really cares about the quality. And
although the exception to that, Sarah, tell me if you agree with this, a really good writer or art director who's been in the business a long time and can think in nanoseconds, whereas a junior team takes weeks, he's not going to force the idea, but an idea will come very quickly. I
have gotten a lot better about speaking. Because I think in the advertising world, and I've worked at a number of different agencies across the country, but intuition is a word that I have noticed more so in some agencies than others has somehow absorbed a somewhat pejorative, it's somewhat sullied. But I feel like I'm like whispering this to you, like, don't tell anyone that I work with, but like I am now a highly intuitive planner, because I have theories about everything that I just carry around in my head. Just because, again, when I first saw Christopher present, I was like, that's what I think about, like, for fun. And so now I can turn a briefing or a brief, depending on the circumstances, I can turn it quickly, because I can get there. Now, I love writing and I love words. I have more books on etymology than I'm such a dork. But
welcome to the club.
Well, that's part of what I love about planning is that we all are. Like, that's my big joke. It's like the planning holiday party. Everyone's like trying to picture like a bunch of planners getting together for a holiday party. And of course, all we talk about is brands. No matter how much alcohol is involved, that's what we talk about.
Or in spite of the alcohol, right?
Exactly. So yeah, Kiwi was a pitch, and it was a relatively large amount of money. And again, TRG, as we're known now, we've had some egregious, unacceptable behavior as an agency. Well, one person in the past few years, but I will be forever grateful that they identified potential in me early on, and then just gave me as much as I could take and as much as I wanted. And I rose to the occasion. Like I'm intrinsically motivated. I can't stop until I know it's there. And I know when it's there.
So you had experience on the Hyundai account. You had a chance to pitch the Dallas Morning News, which was amazing experience for you, and it had a huge influence and impact on your career, which led you to this opportunity to do the pitch. And then you wrote this brief, this famous Kiwi brief, and I know I'm kind of dangling this thing in front of our viewers, which I'll set up before the show even gets underway. This was your first brief.
Yes. And when it became known to me, I have learned personally throughout my life that I am happiest when I'm just in a city I like to be in. So I'm actually have never been super concerned with working at like the hot agency. Like, I want to work at an agency where I like the people I work with. I love the camaraderie. I love being a planner because the camaraderie and everything. So,
Christopher, you said was your boss. Christopher Owens was your boss. And he was someone that who you admired and wanted to be like when you grew up, as you said.
Not past tense.
Right. Okay. Are there other planners or other great thinkers out there who influenced you as well? And you can say, I can point to this book or this article or this conversation that influenced how I think as a planner.
There is one other, and it was actually recently. So I'm on my third stint at the Richards Group. I'm sorry, TRG. See, we all still struggle. Because somehow there's this like cosmic umbilical cord that keeps bringing me back to Dallas, where I'm from, but I'm not a typical, look at me. I don't look like you would picture a woman from Dallas. But prior to this third stint at the Richards Group, I was the head of strategy at Publicis West in Seattle, running T-Mobile. And as many, holding companies and large $1 billion plus per year spenders are requiring, T-Mobile was like, we want you to integrate all of your agencies and all of your, hey, Publicis Group in Paris, bring us the best of all of your agencies. So that included data and, Epsilon, all of these. One of the agencies was BBH LA, which as a planner, exactly. As a planner, wow. I was so excited I could hardly stand it. And their chief strategy officer in LA was a woman named Agatha Guerrier, who goes by AG. She's French. So just AG from this point forward. And I'm already at a very advanced stage in my career. This was 5 years ago. But working with her, she's French and went to school in the UK. At the good school, she had the top-notch education, and I got to work with her like one-on-one, and she really opened up my mind about what a brief can be, because I have an instinct to want to solve the problem myself.
I get that.
Yeah, she kind of, not forcefully, she's a delightful person, just so delightful. But she really encouraged me to write the briefs a little looser so that the creatives weren't, and I've always been sensitive to this, executing on the brief. I hate that term. When I hear that, I'm like,
Hmm.
just, no. I want to inspire you or excite you or give you something that gets your mind going and your wheels turning, and
Right.
you're a problem solver, not a brief executor.
Or
And
just like giving direction, not solutions. That's the way, as a creative, just give me direction,
totally.
And Henry likes to say, I'm humble enough as a brief writer to recognize that sometimes a creative will take my direction and go in a direction that I never anticipated.
And
And
love
it
it.
could be better. It could be better. It could have improved on my ideas, and I'll have to go back and rewrite the brief because I like their ideas better.
I can't tell you, I could not agree with that more emphatically. I think it's, first of all, I think it's a little egomaniacal for planners. That's a big word. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I think sometimes I have definitely encountered planners, we all have, who think that their solution is the best. And the only. I do not think that. I am more than happy if a creative walks in with something that is the brief adjacent, or sometimes not on the brief at all, but it's a great creative solution for the problem I've laid out. I'll be the first to champion it. Because
Okay, let me ask you this. I want to get your sense of the role of a brief and how often the briefs, in your experience, are really good. I often ask the question in my training.
It's a great question.
I ask the question in the training. I say creatives, because I usually get some creatives in the room, because I believe that the creatives have skin in the game. It should be part of the collaborative process of writing the brief. They're the ones who have to execute against it, right? They have to work with it. So I asked the creatives, and I have to. We had a guest. One of our first guests was Vivek Kotli-Buchla. Forgive me for butchering your name, Vivek. He's an advertising consultant, and he was the one who gave me this question. Do you know who he is?
I feel like I've met him. I'm familiar with him.
But he'd asked this question, and I stole this completely from him. It was a great way to frame it. He said, I asked creatives, in the last year, you've done X number of projects, you've read X number of briefs. How many of those briefs would you say truly inspired you? 1 in 10, 3 in 10, 7 in 10? And what do you suppose the answer was? Fewer than one.
A lower number than I would like it to be. Yeah.
Fewer than one.
Yeah.
And I say to my trainees, in my 26-year career as an advertising creative, I can remember one brief, which isn't to say that the other briefs were bad. It's just that there was one that just stood out. I was working at Team One and I was working on a Lexus project.
Yeah.
And the brief writers, the strategists they had 3 weeks to write this brief. So they really did the deep dive like you were describing. It was a relaunch of one of their models.
Yeah. No, right. No, that makes sense.
And I don't remember everything about the brief. I just remember the proposition. Right.
No.
So then the question becomes, because I've read, George Tannenbaum is a favorite of ours. He's been on our show, and I follow him on LinkedIn. He's an amazingly talented copywriter and creative thinker. And he's written about the creative brief. Bob Hoffman has written about the creative brief. He said the creative brief was basically 3 words, and every creative brief should be 3 words: make me famous, make us famous. Right.
Yep.
So there's a lot of angst from creatives about briefs. The expectations are too high, and the promise for delivery is too low. Do you share that? Do you think there are just too few really, really good creative briefs?
I don't want to indict anyone I work with now or have worked with in the past, but absolutely. And I know, I am aware, I have written briefs that aren't great before, and I still think about them. Like, I'm talking 15, 17 years ago, we pitched Principal Financial Group. And you know what? The brief was insightful and trenchant. Everyone's like, holy shit, that's really smart. And it was too tight. And it took us until the 4th creative review to realize that the problem wasn't the creative, the problem was the brief. So, I mean, and I was the one who said, hi, everyone, I don't think the problem is the creative. I think the problem is the brief. So I absolutely believe that number. I mentioned before that my best friend of over 20 years was this amazingly talented creative, and we worked together on new business constantly. And I would always ask them, like, what was it from the brief that led you to this incredible idea? And they would always tell me in our brief, we have like, what is the single most persuasive idea we can convey? And as planners, we tend to focus, again, unilaterally on that as the core of the brief. I actually think differently. I think target audience is like the humans that we're talking to. I think that is as important, if not more in some cases. Again, everything's variable, category, brand, whatever situation.
Right.
But when I would ask my best friend, hi Hunter, they would always tell me, Sarah, it's always target audience, and it's always something you say off the cuff in a briefing, which is, so again, I've been on the briefing versus brief thing, trying to puzzle through that for 15 plus years. She's like, it's always as you can tell, I'm highly tangential, and I sprinkle in pop culture references. And I wrote an entire brief that was kind of based on Lizzo like 5 years ago. And it was great. We won the piece of business. But they always told me, just talk to me. Just talk to me about the brand. Talk to me about the category. Talk to me about the human. And that was where the inspiration came from. Now, that's the dangerous, hackneyed focus group of one. Understand that not all creatives clearly function the same way. But I am often not just at TRG, at every agency I've been at, I have read briefs or seen briefings that I'm underwhelmed by, and that's me being diplomatic. Because I think there's a wide range of philosophies about planning, and some people see it as a very left brain linear pursuit. And I see it as more art than science. That's just how my brain works. But if I put in,
I think there are a lot of people who agree with you, though, Sarah.
yeah, well,
in fact, even Bill Bernbach would say we are not scientists; we're artists.
and that's,
And I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said.
yes, and it's almost like that's the ongoing tension in planning, and it's great. We actually at TRG have a very strong brand strategy department, and we have a wide range of planning styles. Because until recently, Stan Richards was the titular head of each department, which meant each department really had no head. So we have lots of planners with lots of different styles, which is great. But if I write a brief that doesn't excite the creatives, and I always run my briefs by the creatives before the briefing, which is not always done. In fact, not.
Hey, repeat that. People out there, ladies and gentlemen, listening, watching, repeat that. Always run it by the creatives. We have skin in the game, ladies and gentlemen. It's for us. The two things I'd like to say: the creative brief is written for the creatives, but it's from the customer.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. It's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm going to steal that. You mind?
You can, it's all yours. It's all yours.
Phrase-
It's for
phrase
the creatives, but it's from the customer. When you see advertising out there that sounds like it's just talking to itself or talking to marketers, it's because the marketers wrote the brief for themselves.
Yeah, I'm a lot of fun to watch. I actually deliberately, for all my streaming services, get like on Hulu, I have the commercial version. So that at least, unfortunately, too many pharma ads, but at least, and I watch a lot of, I watch a lot of MSNBC, so I see a lot of that too. But I always want to know, and first of all, my friends who don't work in advertising don't believe me. My friends who are in advertising do believe me when I say, I think with 90% accuracy, I can tell you if an ad has been pre-market tested.
Well,
just smacks of it. Or
my philosophy is a truly good creative trumpets. No, what's the word I use? Truly good creative telegraphs the brief.
I can't agree more with, like, I love being a planner, if you can't tell.
I couldn't.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I'm very precious about our reputation, because I think some creatives look at us and they're like, what do you guys do? Like, what do you do? Because I like to cattail.
Yeah, well, she's my assistant. She just joins us whenever she feels like it.
I have definitely seen way too many briefs that if they weren't in our format, I would have thought were client briefs.
Okay, we're going to use this as the transition to the second half of our conversation. We've really gotten a chance to get to know you, to see your brain at work. We're watching your brain function live and in color, as they say. Of course, I haven't heard that phrase since the 60s. What I really want to talk about now is this famous Kiwi brief. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye-bye.